Hello and welcome. We're so happy you took the time to join us. Getting your data into one place, using your data to make operating decisions, and optimizing your inputs are the pillars of the FieldView platform.
Andrew and I are super excited to be here with you today so we can help you get the most out of your data. Our team is currently on standby to answer your questions live. Please use the chat feature on this site with any questions, so keep the questions and comments coming.
The snow is gone, the beards are gone, and the planters are out of the shed. It's time to start talking trials.
Planters, I think you mean air seeders, Andrew.
I mean planters and air seeders, Troy.
Well, speaking of getting seed in the ground, it's time to start talking trials. This is a very important time of year. We want to try to learn something from this year and take it into next year. Some of the questions that I've got over my career is, what's the best hybrid to grow? What's the best seeding rate to go at? What about fertility? As my years with the Canola Council of Canada as an agronomist, one of the biggest questions that I got is, what is the best seeding rate? At the time, some companies would say use our 1,000 kernel weight seed calculator, 5 pounds seed at. Some growers would actually take the TKW, and then that's what they would translate into what their seeding rate would be. And I think that they're all great places to start off, but they don't know what your operation is exactly like. They don't know what type of openers you have, if they're worn out or if they're brand new. They don't know if you're seeding into nice mallow lentil or pulse stubble, or if you're seeding into 120 bushel soft white wheat stubble. They don't know if it's cold soils, wet soils. So for you, I think it's so easy to do at least a seeding rate trial on every field. There's so many different things that we can trial, and there's so many different things that we're going to talk about today with it. Farmers typically only get 30 to 60 tries at optimizing their operation. So let's take something that we learned from this year and move it into next year. And since topic is top of mind, we are very excited to feature Andrea Karstens. She's our field product specialist, who I like to call the field trial specialist, but don't let me introduce her. Andrea, please tell us about yourself.
Thanks, Troy, and thanks, Andrew, for having me today. I'm excited to chat with you all about trials. First, a few things you should know about me. Number one, I'm definitely cooler than Troy. Number two, I'm only slightly cooler than Andrew. But besides that, I also grew up on a grain farm in small town Saskatchewan, Wilkie, for any of you West Central Saskatchewanians on the call. I currently live in Battleford with my husband and my dog, Bullet. I started my career seeding and harvesting trials with DeKalb. After doing that for a couple of years, there was an opportunity to join the FieldView team. There was a catch, though. I had to move to southwestern Ontario, where I became the climate business manager, which is currently the role that Andrew is in. This was a great experience, as before I went there, I pretty much knew nothing about corn. So I learned a lot about that and met a ton of great people. After a year in Ontario, the prairies called me back, and I landed in my current role as field product specialist for Western Canada.
So Andrea, why don't you share what you learned doing trials here in Ontario before you headed back out west?
Well, Andrew, I'll tell you that the first thing I learned was that the Rough Riders and canola were basically non-existent in Ontario. But lucky for me, my colleagues made sure I knew everything there was to know about the Leafs and the London Knights, and then they still let me hang out with them, so that was great. But I also learned a ton about corn trials, the importance of seed spacing, hybrid selection, population, fertility, depth, downforce, soil type, and the list goes on. Understanding these different aspects on your own farm with the different soil types you're dealing with, trials become so important. With the advanced planter technology in the market, there are different amounts of data that can be collected and variable rate planting trials that can be conducted. For example, if you're using precision planting technology on your farm, you might have the ability to track things like singulation and downforce, which have a huge impact on seed spacing and uniform corn emergence. And we all know how important emergence is to contributing to overall yield. And depending on your planter's capabilities, you might also want to explore using variable rate planting prescriptions, using historical data in FieldView to develop zones using our manual prescription tools, or better yet, you could use our advanced prescription tools, FieldView seed scripts for corn, which creates the zones for you and recommends populations based on historical data, yield targets, and economics. If you're a grower that's interested in variable rate technology, I would definitely advise using a prescription to learn about the optimum population for your field. You can do this by placing checkboxes within the predetermined zones to identify that optimum population. As we all know, it all starts with the seed.
It certainly does all start with the seed. So speaking of FieldView seed scripts, do you want to show our viewers how to create one for corn and make a trial out of it as well?
Yeah, for sure, Andrew. To start with, you'd have to go to climatefieldview.ca and log in using your username and password. Once you log in, your screen will look somewhat like mine. You'll have your list of fields on the left and the map of your fields in the middle. When we start to think about FieldView seed scripts, the first thing we need to talk about is purchasing a pro subscription for those fields that you're interested in running a seed script on. So to do that, you see the buy button in the top right-hand corner of our screen. So you would go into there and then you would be able to purchase the seed scripts for the fields that you want to run those on. So after you have a pro subscription on your fields, you would then go into prescriptions up at the top of your screen. And this would take us to our script creator. So once we're in our prescription tool here, find the field that you want to do the script on. I'm going to use a demo seed script field. I don't have any prescriptions, so I'm going to click Create New Prescription at the bottom. This brings up the option to choose planting. Like I mentioned before, FieldView seed scripts is only available for corn, so I will leave corn selected and click Start. Here you can see a number of checkboxes. These are here to remove data that may not be as high of quality as other years. Perhaps there was a dry year, a wet year, we decided to tile. We want to make sure that we have the best data possible for this to create a script. When I have all my information entered in here and I'm ready to go, click Next. I'll leave my planting date at May 1st. I can start typing in my hybrid and it should show up. I can select that. I would enter in my target yield of 200 bushels, a $300 seed cost per bag, and a $5.50 grain price. Then click Next. So here's the cool part. This is where the recommendation from FieldView comes in. You can see that it recommends me 3 zones, the average population in those zones, the average target bushels per acre. But I can adjust this. Maybe I want to change it to 4 zones instead of 3. It's going to recalculate and give me a new recommendation while saving the original recommendation at the bottom. I can also play around with this slider bar here at the top until I get to a place where I'm happy with the script. I'm going to stick with the recommended populations for today and click Finish in Editor. You can see my zones come up on the side here and the populations that it recommends. But of course, I want to make this into a trial, which means that I want to go into the Draw option and choose a rectangle. The reason I want to make sure we make this into a trial is thinking about corn and how responsive it is to higher inputs depending on the zone. We may want to have higher populations in the more productive zones or reduce populations in the less productive zones. If you're interested in trying out FieldView seed scripts this year, there's some opportunities to get a promo code from your dealer. So I would recommend reaching out to them to understand how we can get you some FieldView seed scripts for free this season.
Oh, that's great, Andrea. Thanks for taking us through. It looks like such a powerful tool, and what a way also to be able to make a trial from it and learn from some of those zones. I sometimes get the request, really like the way these zones are created. Can I repurpose them for things like a seed script for soybeans if I wanted to manually create one, or a fertility script, or a crop protection script? And the answer is yes. Once we've saved this prescription, those zones actually act as a template to pull into other prescriptions you may want to make for that same field. So really, really neat tool as we dive into furthering variable rate capabilities.
So enough about corn and soybeans. After your time in Ontario as a CBM, you came back to Western Canada, Andrea. You came back as a field product specialist, and tell us and the folks here a bit about what you do now.
Sure. So after I came back to the province, I've spent a majority of my time with agronomists, retail agronomists, our internal Bayer agronomists, and different independent agronomists across the prairies. I've shown them how to utilize FieldView as their trial management tool, which I suppose that's why you guys invited me here today. Like Troy mentioned, you only get so many tries to get things right and understand what products perform the best on your farm. So doing trials on your farm is going to be crucial to your success.
So now that everyone has an understanding of the knowledge and the expertise that Andrea brings to this webinar and our team, please let's dive into some trials and setups here and some tips and tricks that people maybe don't know about FieldView.
Before we dig too deep into how to set up trials, what kind of trials are you guys thinking about? In my experience, the options are pretty much endless. Heck, some trials are even unintentional. You know that time you ran out of fertilizer, or you just wanted to make sure you didn't have any extra seed left over? Those were trials, even if you didn't know it. And you may have not have had a great way to capture it, but that's what we're going to show you today. My first tip is to keep it simple. It's going to get really confusing and hard to analyze if you have a speed trial combined with a rate trial combined with a hybrid trial with fungicide and top dress trials on top of that. Pick one or two things to learn on each field. What trials do you guys get questions about or want to talk about today?
Well, the common trials in my area are often around hybrid using split planter comparisons, population, and starter fertilizer.
Yeah, very similar here. Lots of variety questions, hybrids, seeding rates, fertilizers. Another one that I always like to talk to growers about and encourage them is every time we go to these farm shows, growers get asked to try this new product for 50 cents an acre or that new product for $75 or $77.50 an acre. And you never know, how well it's going to work unless you leave those good check strips, whether it's something that you add onto your seed, you add into your fertility, or you put in your sprayer tank, or you added a fungicide time. It's always nice to know, is the view worth the climb? Am I getting something out of this product? So there's so many things that we can be trialing, especially on a year when commodity prices are so high. I feel that growers are going to maybe put a little bit extra money into their crops. So let's leave a check strip on everything we do.
That's great advice, Troy. One nice thing about FieldView is that you can record trials on your farm, even if your equipment isn't 100% compatible. There are a lot of different options and you really only need a GPS. So let's start with some basic setup.
Actually, Andrea, we covered basic setup in our last webinar to be viewed anytime on this webinar page. So do you want to show us how to execute a hybrid trial?
Yeah, for sure. The great thing about hybrid trials is they're really easy to set up. So let me just get my demo drive plugged in as I'm here in my office. I want to be able to show you exactly what this would look like from the field. And I'll pull up my CAB app so that we can see the screen. So once we've got everything all connected and we're ready to go, we would start by going to our map screen. You would then select a field. For today, I want to just create a new field. If you guys are already in the field and you have your fields entered in, you would just select that field that you have in your list. Once you pick a field, it will ask you if you want to make that field active. Click yes. And then it prompts me to enter in the hybrids I want to put in my trial. So I'm going to tap to select hybrids to add to my planter. I'm going to start with a canola variety trial. So let's find a canola. Here we go. If I wanted to add a seed treatment, I would tap on the seed treatment button. For today, we're just going to stick with the hybrid trial to not get too many things going on at once. Click confirm. Because I'm using an incompatible rate controller, which some of you may be using as well if your equipment isn't 100% compatible, it's asking me about entering a seeding rate. So I'll enter that in and click confirm. Within FieldView, I'm also able to enter in a couple of fertilizers to put down with my seed, which is great to keep track of those as well. I'll select my tanks, choose tank 1, confirm. My second one here, I'll choose my second blend, select tank 2, done, and confirm. So now I'm pretty much ready to start planting. You can see My tractor there is going along, getting in line to where I want to put that first hybrid in. So once you're ready to start planting that first hybrid, like I mentioned before, I'm using the incompatible rate controller setup. So I would tap to start, and my seeder will start to map that first canola hybrid. And this is how you would continue on in your field. If your equipment is 100% compatible, you wouldn't have to worry about that tap to start or tap to stop button. It would just start mapping as soon as your drill is putting seed in the ground. You can see that I am currently looking at the population map. If I tap where it says population and go to variety, now we can see the hybrid that I'm putting down here. When I want to switch to my next hybrid, I would tap on that variety box in the top left-hand corner of my screen. I would then click the exit beside my first hybrid and then tap to select a new hybrid. Tap select, confirm, and you can see here that my second hybrid is mapped in a different color, so I can easily keep track of exactly where I place those two different hybrids. It's a really easy way to keep track of everything and be able to do analysis at the end of the year.
Andrea, Andrew was mentioning earlier about split planters and trials. Could you tell me a little bit more about that, what that looks like and how that setup goes?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm just going to take a second here and flip over to a planter, as I was using an air seeder before.
The nice thing about recording that data live in equipment that's completely compatible, anytime you lower your speed, you increase your speed, you increase your seeding rate, or you decrease your seeding rate, the same thing with your fertility, all of that is mapped in the CAB app. So you're able to record that, and then at the end of the year, see what those differences are.
So now that I have a planter here, I need to add a hybrid to my planter. So I'm going to tap on that yellow box where it says tap to enter up here. And I'm going to tap to grab a hybrid on here. Not doing canola anymore, so I'm going to scroll down and find a corn hybrid. Select. Beside the corn hybrid here, you see the word all. This means that I'm currently going to plant this hybrid in all of the rows of my planter. If I tap on there, I can then choose the left half, click done, and this is how I would go about setting up to do a split planter trial. Then I need to add an additional hybrid for the other half of my planter. Select a corn hybrid. This time I'll choose the right half. I'll click done, confirm, and now here we can see the two colors are going down at the same time, which means that I have half my planter planting one hybrid and half planting the other hybrid. A really great way to essentially have a replicated strip trial across your entire field.
You know, the other neat thing about that, Andrea, I've seen some keeners do is they'll increase and decrease the seeding rate when they have that split planter option. So not only do they know what the best variety to grow is, but they also know what the best seeding rate to grow that variety is.
Yeah, I can show you how you can do that on here, Troy, quick if you want.
Please do.
So we're looking at our hybrid map right now. If I tap on hybrid and switch that back to population, with this incompatible rate controller setup, I chose 32,000 seeds per acre. If I tap on that population box, I'm now able to change that. So if I manually changed it on my planter, I would then come into FieldView with this incompatible rate controller setup. If your planter is compatible with FieldView, the nice thing about this is as you bump up your rate, FieldView is automatically going to map that for you. So let's put this up to 34,000 seeds. Done, confirm. And then we will see a change in color there to keep track of those different populations.
Another common trial that comes up is fertility, Andrea. Wondering if you have any tips to show our users how we would end up mapping that.
Yeah, that's a great call. Fertility is really important regardless of what crop you're planting and has a big impact at the yield at the end of the day. Something to call out is, and have an understanding about, is the fact that with the field region report, we're not going to be able to see our fertility. If you're mapping your fertility and not as concerned about doing a trial or or understanding what those different rates could do and you just want to map it, I would recommend doing it how we did with the canola. We added those blends in after I added in my canola varieties. If we are really interested in being able to easily analyze a different fertility rate at the end of the year, I can take these corn hybrids that I was planting before and just make an adjustment to that title to be able to have an easy way to identify where I changed that fertilizer rate. So if I tap on hybrid here at the top, let's get rid of these corn hybrids that we were planting before. Let's tap to select a new hybrid. I'm going to click Add New Hybrid at the bottom here, and I'm going to type out a custom hybrid name. So I'm going to put hybrid 1 with extra fertility. I'm going to add that as a custom hybrid of corn. I'm going to click confirm. And now I'll be mapping my first hybrid, but with an extra bit of fertility. If I switch my population map over to my hybrid, it now adds a third color in there so that I can see exactly where I changed that fertilizer rate. And this will allow me to use my field region reports at the end of the year to understand how that affected my corn. One call out with that though is that this hybrid 1 will not be combined with the other hybrid 1 in your yield analysis tab. So it just kind of depends which piece of that trial is most important to you on your farm.
Yeah, I think that's a really good tip, Andrea. So if growers are out there wanting to do 1 strip or 2 strips of a fertility that's, let's say, 1.2 or 1.3 times the blend or the starter blend, then that's when they would put that in and then have that 1 strip or 2 strips and then be able to get that good analysis. So now that we know how to do those, what about other things that I want to map? I want to map things like, what's my seeding depth? I know that I change it halfway through some fields. Sometimes I realize that my seeding depth is too deep or it's too shallow, or other things maybe that I wanted to trial. How would I do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's a new feature that was added a couple years ago called a custom map option. So at the bottom of my screen here, you see this edit button underneath all those blue boxes. If I tap that, it actually allows me to adjust that legend. So I can have different metrics showing up at all times. So I would scroll down and see that custom map option there. I would press, hold, and then drag and replace it with one of the other metrics that I have on the left side of my screen. Exit out of that metric pane. And when I tap this custom map, now I can enter in seeding depth. Click done. And I will say this is seeding depth 1, done. So I'm still on my hybrid map. So if I click where it says hybrid at the top, scroll down, I now have a new map that shows up on here called seeding depth. I can click that and you can see I'm on my first one. So the first seeding depth I chose is represented by the orange color. If I wanted to change this to my second depth, I would tap on that box that says seeding depth, enter in a new zone name, I'll say 2, click done, and now I have 2 different seeding depths being mapped in my field.
So Andrea, thanks so much for taking us through that. It just goes to show you can find countless trials to map inside FieldView, especially using the custom map option. And one of the things I often hear about is often our users want to be able to share what they did or what their trials were with those close to them who have an interest in their trials. And one of the great opportunities with FieldView is we can also share our accounts and allow those close to us to be able to have a look at our trials that were conducted. And so one of the opportunities is to go up to the top right-hand corner in the FieldView web account and go settings, sharing. And then under sharing, it will show you who you've shared with and also allow you to share your account with others. And so if I was to share this with Troy as an example, I would put in his Climate FieldView account email, and I could then share my whole operation, or maybe I just wanted to share a field. And I could also include yield data, or I could exclude yield data. And so I'm really in control as I go and do this. And then I can collaborate again with somebody who has an interest in the trials that I'm conducting here. And maybe they want to help me scout and get even more out of that information. And so some great opportunities here as it pertains to sharing that field data with your advisors as well.
Yeah, Andrew, I definitely think that sharing is caring, especially in this situation. You know, we want to work with our trusted advisors, people that you know are in the industry, know what other growers are doing, that are working with you to try to help you find better ways to do things. So I want to encourage farmers to work with those folks. And if you want to work by yourself and do it, or with other neighbors, then do that too. But I think the number one thing that I want to get across is treat every field like it was a test plot. Let's try to learn something on every single field that you have. It'll give us something to analyze over the winter months and see maybe what we want to trial next year and the year after. I also want to be very clear that we can't take all of our eggs and put them in the basket that won the previous year. So I think it's going to take 2 or 3, probably closer to 3 or 5 years of data to collect before we can really start to make solid agronomic consistent recommendations. So I think it's important to start to build up that bank of trials that you're doing and build up that data set that you have. So then you can truly use your data to make those great operating decisions.
So thank you so much for joining us here today. We hope you found opportunities for trials on your farms as you go into the 2021 season. And thank you so much, Andrea, for sharing with us all the opportunities that we learned here and those tips and tricks for getting the most out of FieldView to understand what's working and maybe what's not, what needs changing on our farms here today.
Yes, Andrea, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for your expertise. Thanks for being a part of the team, and a special thanks for coming back to Saskatchewan.
Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun. Thanks everyone for joining. Have a great day.
And our next webinar will be focused on scouting and field health imagery in May, so stay tuned for that invitation. And as always, they'll all be hosted at climatefieldview.ca/webinars here in the portal. Thank you.